I'm going to start with unconventionally, right? I'm actually going to ask you all a question. What was your time to AI this morning? Normally when I ask that, that's the exact response that I get. I'll clarify. From the moment you were dead asleep, right, to when you think you interacted with an AI, how long do you think that took? Just yell out the numbers. Seconds? Some people sleep with an Apple Watch, so it might be, 0, right?
Never.
Uh-huh.
Always have it with me.
You always have it with you? So you're in the 0 camp?
I'm in the 0 camp.
Oh, okay.
Same.
So the reason why I lead every single conversation that I have about responsible use of AI ethics, or trustworthy AI, I lead with this question. Because if these tools integrated into the software and devices that we depend on is to be ubiquitous, it better be fair. Right? Is that a controversial statement? No. Right? And so today, I am excited. I'm really excited. I was jumping out of my seat. We were just having conversations about some of the questions that we're going to be talking about. And I'm excited because understanding what needs to be done, when we at work, our bosses, or if it's bottom up, we collectively set our objective functions for what we define as fair in the software that we build. We tend to look at ethics as a constraint to achieving our goals. So, for example, don't violate someone's privacy in order to achieve the goal. But I think ethics is equally about setting goals and sometimes even determining if a goal is worthwhile. So cutting corners when building that computer vision model to detect people. And if the goal is to just get more people to use the tool, and you're alienating a subset of your users because they don't get detected, that is a good goal, or at least a positive determiner as to whether that's a good objective to sort of go. So just think about objective functions, whether you are making those decisions out here in this audience as we talk, or if you are at least given a voice in your organization in order to do this. So that's one thing. And then, not to make this about me, it's about these wonderful people on the stage here today. I'll have them quickly introduce themselves here in a second, but I wanted to introduce myself first and say I'm Noble Ackerson. I lead, in my full-time job, I lead the integration and implementation of machine learning for both commercial customers like SiriusXM, Pandora, AT&T, and commercial customers like USGS, USDA, specifically the FPAC, if you're familiar with FPAC. And we integrate these models into production every day, and this is mostly narrow ML, I guess they call it now, not this fancy stuff lately. So that's what I do. And one thing I have learned over the years in doing this is that the harms of AI, and I'm not talking about these existential risk type harms, like Jeff Hinton and others are talking about, that it's gonna, we're all gonna die kind of thing. I'm a pragmatist, right? So I'm talking about the harms today. It's all about us. It's about the bias, for example, that we encode into the data that gets used by the algorithms that get used to deliver the tools that woke you up this morning, maybe. It's about the feedback. It's about us, the feedback that we give these tools. So say, for example, my daughter using Midjourney for the first time types in, beautiful girl, and had to ask me, why is it returning an Asian lady? Or why is it returning a white lady? And not someone like me. I said, well, it's a conversation with a machine. Try to use a black person. And it just did not listen. Well, is it her fault? Is it the machine's fault? Is it the data? That's for discussion today. I personally think if I were to type in beautiful woman by flagpole and I wasn't thinking about race. And I just saw someone with round eyes or whatever I've been pre-programmed to believe is beautiful, I would select that. And guess what? That's feedback for the system to do more of that. So is it my fault? Well, today we're going to cover 3 themes, and we're going to be talking about awareness. How we make everyone aware, this being one of those forums. What can we do about it? And how do we know we've gotten there? Are we going to ever get to a utopia where ethics is by design or imbued into the tools that we build? And with that, I'll let people introduce yourself. Just pass the mic once you're done.
Sounds great. Y'all hear me okay? So I'm Sneha. I run the data science team at SalesLoft, been there for like 5 years. If y'all don't know about SalesLoft, we're actually an ATV graduate ourselves. We're an Atlanta-based company. And as part of running the data science team, obviously, like my team members, we're like building AI tools all the time. We're delivering AI research for the SalesLoft as a product. And so we do, wrestle with a lot of these ethical questions when it comes to third-party AI that we use or AI that we build and so on. So this is a topic that's very interesting to me. And with that, I'll pass it over.
Hey everyone, I'm Kelly. I am Director of Engineering at a video intelligence startup called Spot AI, which you can probably imagine the kind of ethical fun we get into. I've been there for about 1.5 years now, so my team now focuses more on the data visualization side of things, so I'm no longer directly managing the AI team, and so it's been an interesting transition for me going from managing this team to being a little bit more on the outside in from, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the engineers side of it, of actually being really excited about the products you're building, versus the outside looking in, you're thinking a lot more about the ethical principles that are coming, the business principles that are coming with what we're building. So that's what I spend most of my time on these days.
Hi, I'm Tara Walker. I am a menial engineer at Microsoft, and I actually mean that for real. I don't know why I'm up here with these folks. I was in the office of CTO, so of Microsoft, and as you guys know, we kind of launched really heavily with OpenAI. So Office of CTO also owns Microsoft Research, and that's where I come from. Right now, I've also transitioned to what we call DevDiv, and now that's taking these things and implementing them so developers like you can then use them. So both sides of those coins, is, to your point, the transition is really interesting to view things differently. All right, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, my name is Martin Rojas. I'm currently a UI architect with Play on Sports. We partner with high schools, athletic departments to kind of help them ticketing, all the things that goes with the athletic department. But I'm up here because I'm more the developer and user side of things. And in my previous job, I helped in kind of consuming all the models and things, particularly the OpenAIs, and putting out a product with it. So that's how I've kind of gotten familiar with AI, from kind of taking all these things that have been coming out and on the receiving end, kind of understanding it and using it into creating an actual product with it and understanding how that producing something and a product that comes from it.
Great. So let's just start by level setting. I'm sure we've heard the terms trustworthy AI, responsible AI, ethical AI, and the title of this talk is Ethics in AI. So I guess let's go around, Robin, and try to define, from our unique perspectives, what ethics in AI means.
Yeah, I can go first. When I think of the word ethics, I think of the word responsibility. You just mentioned that word. A lot of people confuse ethics with like staying within the legal realms or like privacy and security. I do agree that obviously we want to, follow the law and like keep data secure and all of that. But ethics to me goes beyond that. It's sort of the moral principles that you have in order to ensure that you're minimizing the wrong thing from happening, right? So that's how I would define it.
Yeah, I'm very much on the same line as the responsibility piece. We have to have conversations at Spot about, we're trying to create a safer world through video intelligence, but often with safety, you then have privacy concerns because you're identifying people. And there's a lot of risk that comes with that. So for me, ethical AI and bringing ethics into AI is finding that balance of what should we do to promote safety without being detrimental to people's privacy.
I think my definition of ethics in AI is probably different than most people. When I think of ethics in AI, I think about how do we reduce harm for the most vulnerable people with AI. That's how I always think of AI. And to me, if I'm being ethical with AI in whatever I'm doing, that means I am being mindful of the folks that will be harmed the most, but maybe not but have the least amount of voice and say so. So that's how I think about ethics in AI.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's ethics in the kind of practical sense kind of gets lost a lot in the in sort of high-minded discussions. But what it boils down to is a responsibility when you're building of understanding how the technology works and the harm that it can possibly, like thinking those 2-3 steps of how it can be used and the responsibility you have and should you even build it, or at least if you build it, what should you do to reduce the harm? At least that's ethics in AI, particularly in development.
And I would pose it to y'all. Y'all don't have mics, so just think about this. What does ethics mean to you in a world where some companies are completely laying off the entire trust and safety teams right before an election? Not to make this political, but in your organization, within your teams, what are your beliefs? And I'm going to sort of segue with that word, beliefs, right, into how we make our teams aware, how we become aware ourselves of some of these tools and how we use them internally, how we deliver them for our customers and stakeholders as well. And so in my current role, we, even on the government side, NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology, released, and also the DIU, Defense Intelligence, I don't know what DIU is, but every government agency has a different set of principles. It all inherits from the same base. On the commercial side, I create communities of excellence for data and advanced analytics and nowadays AI as well. And frankly, those principles are the same words that we hear from some of the big players, IBM, Microsoft, Shopify. Everyone has principles, right? In my view, right, the principles get ignored. Companies do a good job marketing those principles, but that gap between this is what we believe in as fair, this is what we believe we have to do, this is how we're constraining our objective function to deliver software that doesn't harm people, as you mentioned, becomes a tension, right? Let me ask this, how important is sort of data literacy, or even how can the lack of awareness about AI's potential harms disproportionately affect some of the underrepresented women, people of color, in general, folks that get marginalized from some of these tools that are ubiquitous in our lives?
I can kick things off with a very specific example. There's a certain large company out there, which I'm not going to use names, that was, they hire a lot of people, and it's some work. If you've been on the hiring manager, the hiring end of things, especially these days with the number of layoffs, I get hundreds of applications for one role. It takes some time to get through these applications, these resumes, and a lot of companies are turning to AI to automate this process, to get through them a lot faster. And you mentioned data literacy. if you don't understand where your data is coming from and what the source of this data is to begin with, you're perpetuating the bias that exists within that data. So in this particular example, they were using this HR system to automatically pass on and reject certain candidates. Well, the system was trained around their previous candidates that they had hired, which was disproportionately men. And so it was automatically rejecting a lot of women and putting men into the next round. And until they started, eventually they're like, oh, maybe this is actually a bad thing and we shouldn't be doing this. And they stopped using the system. But this is a real life system, and this is one company that's doing this. There are tons of companies out there using very similar systems.
So one of the companies I worked for, who also shall remain nameless, was putting together a system that possibly could have been used by law enforcement. And I thought about that exact thing because the training data and the labeling data, whether it was indirect harm or direct, was not reflected of real society, right? It was reflective of the people that were building it, right? And so when you think about how do we build these models, the data we collect, and things of that nature, when we started to test these systems, some of the biases, again, whether indirect or direct, start to come out in this. And we were going to go, because I don't work there anymore, and we were going to go forward and release this, as well as promote this to this big law enforcement place. And it got a lot of backlash. And I remember in the team, no one got it. And to me, that was the moment that I realized, that's why I said change my definition of ethics. No one got it because they were like, but we did the right thing. So the challenge is what is defined as the right thing when they honestly were just outdone, that they felt like the system that they worked so hard with could not be promoted. So to me, that's for my perspective on that.
One of the ways that, to think about it and really bring it down and, bring in the concept of what an AI is to a level, it's a pattern recognition. It's essentially a stereotype generation system. So if you think about what that has that created in society, that's what you're doing. So it's a automated system of creating really stereotypes, and what does that mean? So the data that you give it is the stereotypes you're going to create. You just don't know what the stereotypes are until you get the output.
I'm going to have to use that. It's so true. I mean, we talk about some of the some of the drivers of ethics in the software that we build, whether it's AI or not. For me, just to add on to how we define this, which we should probably have started with, a lot of real technologists in the room are going to probably frown at me, but all machine learning is, or AI, artificial intelligence is, to me, sorry for using that interchangeably, is a data transformation, right? It is us. Remember I said the biases, the issues that we have that flag, that drives these ethicists nuts. I'm not an ethicist, by the way. Is just the imperfections of human reality, right? And so it's us. And so, that data gets transformed, and since it's us, it's our stereotypes, like you said, and that gets delivered as a product output, integrated into augmenting our work or automating something that's repetitive in our lives, and it's ubiquitous sometimes, or it's problematic, and thus it needs to be fair. So I think that we're starting to see a theme here. But go ahead.
I don't know if you guys remember, and hopefully I won't date myself. When system first passed the Turing test, right? We got really excited about it. And do you guys remember that on Twitter we released a bot?
Yep.
Do you remember this?
I remember this.
And so you would talk about stereotypes. I'd agree with this. Remember we released this bot. Does everybody remember this, or I'm just way too old? Okay. All right. So we released this bot, and it was interacting and tweeting out with people. And the more it interacted and tweeted out with people, the more toxic you got, the more racist, the more homophobic, name all the bad isms. It got all of them. And I think about now, and that was back then, how much more data we consume and what we put in as patterns. We talked about our watches. Everyone is probably on every social media here. Those patterns of what you look at and what you repeat, and even down to LinkedIn, which is supposed to be professional ones, what is flagged or not flagged, is now going into kind of exactly what happened with that Twitter system. Are we, so back to your original question, are we as humans sitting in this room, not just technologists, but humans, are we perpetuating AI in a way that it will become like that bot, where we then make stereotypical systems? And so that's the thing I think about as somebody as a purveyor of this, because we can't change everyone, right? And so when you talked about what is bias versus fairness and ethics, it goes down to what our belief systems are in this very polarized world. So how do we not let AI, fall on our own fallacies?
Anyone wants to jump in on that? I've got thoughts. So Tay, the Twitter bot that went crazy, I looked into the history of that from the outside in. And months before Tay got launched, there was Microsoft released a similar bot in China. And that bot was extremely successful. The research that I was looking into showed how, teenagers would look to that bot and interact with it and loved it. There was a lot of engagement. And so some enterprising leader at Microsoft perhaps said, we've got something here. Let's, ethicists, you safety team, y'all chill. We got gold. So they launched it, and we know how that story went. It also, what you're saying reminds me of, how much time do we have? Anybody keeping time? 25 more minutes. I'm going to anchor on this real quick. It also reminds me of, I'm really dating myself here, Ralph Nader. Anybody who knows who that is? You're dating yourself. So Ralph Nader, to oversimplify, helped make it normal to have seatbelts. Seatbelts in your car. He released a book, something called Unsafe at Any Speed, and he asked a simple question in that drove a lot of the themes in that book, and drove a lot of the policies that went into making, some of the safety in cars. It was basically, how much money, to the car makers, how much money are you willing to invest or spend at the cost of one death, during the operation of one of those vehicles? Because at the time, it's like what's old is new again. A lot of lobbyists, big auto, if that's a thing, was, that's cost, right? We have to take a step back and see what seatbelts are there, and then we have to standardize it because, we've got a supply chain, that kind of stuff. It's not a walk in the park. They fought it tooth and nail. But the simple question here was, based on that investment, are we willing to kill people or not? Or the lack of that investment, what does it mean to have blood on our hands? And I'm sort of sensationalizing a serious question, but those are kind of things that makes me respect some of the work that goes into responsible AI and what ethicists that are grounded in today's realities, not to diminish the fact that an AI could take over someday, a nuclear bomb, and kill all of us. We're not there yet, as far as I know. And so, again, we're grounding this in conversation with machine learning models that are already out in production today. All right. So we've talked about the awareness thing a lot. What can we do? What can technology teams do, about this? Like, I talked about how there's a gap between what ethicists think it's a principle and versus the reality of business norms and the tensions that come into it. So what can you do?
I can kick us off on this one. I think it starts with awareness, really, and education. As technologists, we're in a really good position because we can seep through the hype around AI, and hype goes both ways, right? There's the AI is going to kill us all in a nuclear war hype, and there's also AI is the best thing that's ever happened since sliced bread hype, right? And so we can seep through that. We can hit right to the middle and like say, okay, this is an amazing tool. What are the harms it can do in our specific use case? And that part is also important because unlike cars, where everybody drives cars in roughly the same way, AI, y'all are probably applying it in like very different ways.
Personalized too.
It's very personalized. The way like Salesloft uses AI is very different from the way Spot uses it, right? And so our risks, our harms are going to be different. And so as technologists, our first step is, okay, like let's understand what it can do for our domain. And let's educate people. I feel that's one thing that has changed, at least personally, from the way I see my team's role, where we've gone into, ever since November, happened last year, we've gone into this like cycle of, okay, let's learn a ton about it. Let's tell people about it, right? Tell business leaders, tell technology leadership about, product leadership about these things, about the good as well as the bad, right? And the other thing I want to add is also like, someone mentioned about like, is AI doing the right thing? And one of the things that we all need to be not comfortable, but like contend with, is that there may not be a right or wrong for a lot of these things, right? Lots of stuff are in the gray area. And so one of the things that I have found useful is the idea of defining, specific risk levels for your business or like for whatever you're building for your customers. And like, what would be the mitigation strategy if your AI falls within one of those risk levels, right? Because there's some things that are wrong, or not wrong, but like there's some types of risks that are kind of like really low, and maybe you'd over-engineer it to do something, but you're missing the risk that's like, really high and would cause a lot of harms, right? So just defining those risk levels, the mitigation strategy is super important. And then finally, and I'll hand it over to someone else, I would also say that not educating customers, but more about like building systems that assume, or like building systems within your product that that sort of contend for these risks, right? Where you're making your design, you're creating your design in ways that doesn't increase those risks or increase those harms, so that users don't fall into a trap, right? So those are some of the things that, I know there's a lot, but those are some of the things that we can do to move forward.
One of the things I wanted to add is I think as technologists, one of the things we should, from this kind of birth of AI, we should be demanding is the tooling that we have in all other parts of development. Sort of like, there are a lot of the tooling right now is being focused on create models, create, and have a model, and then you can use it, but you have no idea once it's running, it's in there. We had a talk earlier today about Heisen bugs or observability once it's in deployment, once and things like that. Essentially, once your model is live, that's tooling around understanding what it's doing and why is it doing the things that you're doing. Because right now, it takes essentially PhDs at a high level of math to understand or even to guess what the model is doing and why it's even doing, and it's very quickly going to get to a point that we can have no idea what it's doing. And that's kind of where the doomsayers, George Hinton, is, it's calling the sky's falling, because we're barely understanding why things are doing the things that are doing. And as it's growing, it's going to get to a point where we can't. But from here, we should be asking for the same kind of tools and observability that we have in every other place of our development cycle, right? We deploy something to anywhere in production, we expect to be able to see it, and if something crashes, to debug it. With AI, it's just like, oh, it's a black box. We get something back, I don't know why. That's all you can say. But we should, it should be an expectation of like, I want to know why it's giving me that answer. And that should be something we should be asking for.
One thing we do at Spot is we have an ethics council, and the ethics council is representative not just from different backgrounds, but different positions within the company as well. So it might have an engineer, a product manager, a few people in sales, somebody in support, an executive. So you're getting different voices from the company from different backgrounds coming in to discuss any kind of ethical issue or any kind of feature we might be introducing into our platform that has ethical concerns. And when you're a company called Spot AI, a lot of them have ethical concerns. So we have a lot of conversations about it. I wanted to kind of touch on one thing you said around kind of setting up guardrails for how a product can be used. One thing that we've learned over time is people will always find a way to abuse a product. People will always find a way to use it for harm. And you can't control that. You cannot control every single possible use case. I was on back-to-back customer calls one time. We were talking about the possibility of introducing license plate recognition. The first customer call had, they were talking about wanting to use it for automatically recognizing if somebody already had a subscription so they could get through the lane faster and they don't have to sit and wait and punch in a bunch of information. So they're looking from a business efficiency standpoint. The next call I was on, I was talking to this individual, and he was like, yeah, we've actually used license plate recognition before. I'm like, oh, I would love to know how you're using it. And they said, we set up a camera to face outside of our property on the street that's just vehicles passing by. And we would capture the license plates of those vehicles passing by, see if they had ever come to our business before, and if not, we would look up their address on DDS or whatever, and then send them a mailer to get them to come in. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, how do I get myself out of this conversation? Because this is a terrible idea. And when you're talking to a potential customer, I'm not going to immediately just, this is terrible. Anyway, they don't think they're using license plate recognition with us, so we avoided that one. But I mean, this is a perfect example of people will always find they have different ideas of how this can benefit them, and people have different understanding of that level of harm that they could bring with these ideas. So the education piece is also really, really important.
Mine is going to be really simple because I feel like I don't have as much as dog in the fight, so this is just my opinion. I've really gotten really strong about following people like Joy Bawami and Timnit in their organizations to try to just support what they're doing to try to normalize and standardize on what ethics means in the engineering world for AI. And so I feel like you need some of us outside of our bubble of this is so cool, right, to really kind of balance that out. So I don't really know what to do, but I feel like people who are really focused like them, who have experienced this in different lenses, now are forming organizations, and they've been very intimate in not only building the models, but how they express ethics and their ramifications for it. And the last thing I'll say about this is I'll pose almost a question and a statement. You say, what can we do? Can we do anything if the people that are put in place to prevent us from shooting off our own foot are being ostracized or pushed out, to make sure we have some normalcy? So that's a statement and a question.
That's like spot on, right? So if y'all have been following, you've got a spectrum, right, of how the society at large is sort of wrestling with ethics, right? You've got the I call them the long-termism people, TESCREAL people, if y'all know that term. So the sky is falling, right? Kind of folks, they have good points, and there do need to be guardrails. That's one end of the spectrum. You got pragmatists, worry about how it's harming people today, while setting a roadmap and a framework for protecting people tomorrow. And no, I'm not talking about put a pause on it, because that's ridiculous, right? And then you've got the techno-optimist folks who call us evil. I don't know whether y'all read, if you could get through it, Mark Andreessen's, I don't call it a manifesto, because no one writes.
Diatribe.
Right. So you got that spectrum. It's, the sky's falling, best thing since sliced bread, And then some of us who just have to work I don't know. How many people in this room are on the data side of the software that you build? I'm oversimplifying. Got one hand up, two hands. You work with data? All right. How many people are on the application side, software development, integration? Okay, a lot more hands. Anybody work with AI on a daily basis here? Few numbers. Okay. Are you on the because it's so, I don't even like using the word AI. I still think it's a marketing term. What part of machine learning are you? Are you on the data input, data prep side? What part of the workflow are you? All of it, okay. Okay. Anyway, all right, so I don't know where that was going, but I just wanted to get a pulse as to who I was talking to. Is this useful, though, this conversation? Is it educational? Okay, great. All right, good. Then we can move on to, remember, we've covered I promised 3 themes. We first defined, from our unique perspective, what ethical AI was. I'll sort of give because I'm the moderator, I'll give my definition at the end. We then talked about awareness, right? And thank you, y'all. Spirit animals right here. Like I learned a lot there. We talked about what we can do within the perspective, and hopefully you guys are picking up. That last piece is, where we're going, right? How do we know we've gotten there? Could we even get there? So I guess a provocative question gets people going. Will we ever get to a point where we have software tools with ethical AI built in by design? So what are we doing here?
We're doing the best we can.
Right, I was about to say.
Just by definition, ethics keeps changing, right? Our own moral beliefs keep changing. My own moral beliefs have changed. And so by that definition, I don't think even if we perfect it, like we're not gonna have a software tool that does this for us.
Yeah.
So, okay, the optimist in me, because I always try to be like, it's gonna be okay. The optimist in me says, okay, we're gonna get there, just like the seatbelts, right? Think about all the pushback, and again, I'm gonna say I wasn't old enough to remember all of that, but think about that was a major change in a huge industry that was like fast, and money. So I think just like we've gotten there with other things, I'm hopeful. People thought the cars we drive, bump seatbelts, cars versus going from horse and buggy was going to be the end of the world. People thought computers and these big data centers we had was going to be the end of the world. Was it 2K? Remember the 2K bug?
Y2K.
We all weren't supposed to be here. And then it was over. And people thought that cell phones, when we went from the bags to the phones and everything else, it was going to be in the world. So the optimist in me says this too is just another transition that we as human beings that care about other human beings can get past and over and not harm people. So the optimist in me is like, we are going to get there. Now, we don't know how because we're kind of clawing for each inch at this point, but I think we're going to get there. Now, pragmatically, if I'm just going to be honest, when I see, sorry for those of you guys who are in leadership, the leaders in AI right now, and these are companies that I've worked for, and even in some places the company, because Microsoft is big, that I work for right now, that's what makes me cautious. And I'm just going to be very forthright. Because we have some folks that are so passionate about getting the product to market. We have some folks that are so passionate about the possibilities. And honestly, it is with the best intent, but I'm Southern, so my grandma says the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so I see that happening there, and with some of the teams that is on that are not the most healthy teams, it gives me pause to my optimist stance, right? Because I see some of the products that are being put out there and the people that are leading these products that don't care. And I'll give a really quick anecdote from a company I do not work for anymore. I was an engineer on a product. It was going to be computer recognition. They have a big conference, And because you guys think I like talking to people and I'm not as introverted as I am, when not talking about tech, they decided I was going to be the one to be on the stage with the dude live to talk about this new feature. And so the head of this guy, the CVP or EVP, I forgot what his title was, one of the high guys, Stanford guy, and you knew that because he made sure you knew he was from Stanford every time you talked to him, and I do me every time. We were about to go on stage. I'm on this team, and I quickly made up a demo because I always believe if I'm showing someone tech, Erica knows this a lot about me, I want folks to look at the code and look what I did kind of thing. And I found a bug, and we're about to go on stage. I said, we're about to release this. At least we're going to go and do this. This bug is major. Let's make sure that we, look at it. I have my laptop. I turned it around to him. It's me and my coworker sitting, and we're just standing just as close as this. And I'm showing him the bug. I'm talking about it. He looks at me, then he turns to my coworker. So what bug is it? And I'm like, me, I know I'm low to the ground and you can't see me, but I'm here. And so I was like, no, I found the bug. And I'm kind of goofy at first. Sometimes I don't get the clues. And he was like, there's no way you could have found this. Let me ask about him. This is the same guy who is leading up the charge for this company that I work for to have law enforcement use our tool. This is the same guy who ruled his organization with iron fist. This is the same guy that we're all on stage, and he didn't let any of us talk because it was him running the show. Again, you forgot he also needed to tell you who's from Stanford. And I thought about that as I continued on in this team, and I started playing with the tool with my friends, and sure enough, it didn't detect me. It didn't detect that I was a woman sometimes. I had to make sure my hair was down. It didn't detect that I was human sometimes. It detected a lot of times that me and my friends were either angry or not angry. It didn't matter if we were smiling or not. It detected a bunch of things that I was like, wow, I'm in a team being driven by a guy that I know for sure has some level of bias. I don't know what it is. Short people, woman, people with melanin. I don't know what it was, but he didn't like me. And that he denoted my male counterpart to be more effective, efficient, and I'm working for this team building a solution. So that's a long way of saying, yes, my optimism, he said we're going to get there. But what are we going to do about the leadership right now that has been raised up in this that don't have accountability? And this story could be applied to some of the other big companies that we see some stuff that happened during the pandemic with AI and ethics. What are we doing as people that are purveyors of this how are we fixing leadership, and can we? So that's my
Beautiful.
2 cents.
I want to start wrapping up here to allow others to join the stage. Any last words?
I guess, just kind of going into her, I think one of the things to remember is that, as I said before, all this AI, I was saying it's like the biases that were in there from the team gets ingrained into the models. And I think our jobs are to question those outputs and to make sure that those outputs get questioned, and whatever those assumptions are ingrained into the models, we know them so that we can make the right decisions for them. Because even if it's the most inclusive or in there, it is a stereotype. It is an assumption, right? It is so it's a recognition pattern. That's what all AI is, right? So if we understand what they are, we can build the right solution for it. It's a tool like everything else.
I want to end on a little bit of a positive note, actually a lot of positive note. Something that makes me happy, right? It makes me happy that we're having this conversation, right? Like how many tech conferences, I don't know, 10 years ago were talking about ethics, right? It makes me happy that we're having this conversation about ethics. Tomorrow I'm actually going to be at Georgia State University's campus talking about ethics with a bunch of master's and data science students. It makes me happy that, in school now, when teaching data science and data analytics, there are courses about ethics, right? This is a great place to be in that sense. So I do share Tara's optimism over here because I know it's not perfect right now. I know it's going to be bumpy. We just said that AI is so personalized. We're all going to have to figure it out. But I do share a lot of optimism because I feel like the efforts that's being made, the efforts in education, efforts in conferences, in communities such as these, it's all moving in a positive direction, shining light where it should.
I think that's the perfect note to end. I'm not ruining
That's a fantastic place to end. And thanks you, everyone. I promised you one last word to how I define it. Ethics. Ethics, given, Kelly, you said it perfectly earlier, so I'll riff off of that. You said that society changes, right? Societal norms change. And even cultures are different. And so whatever our corner of the world defines as a societal norm, right, at a given point in time is how we reflect those as principles or objective functions into the things that we build. And that, in turn, gets translated into responsible, in this case, AI, responsible delivery of the tools that we build, which in turn turns into trustworthiness or at least optimizing for the trust, the data trust, meaning the transparency in which we build these things, the value that we deliver, and the ultimate acceptance of any consequences that may come should there be a leak or a breach. These are tools. They can be used for good or bad, and at least I hope that this has been a fruitful conversation for everyone. We've learned something. I certainly have. Thank you so much for the panelists here. I'm honored to be amongst y'all. Erica, Beth, the whole Refactor team, thank you so much for inviting me over. I got invited and I was like, when's my flight? I'm flying next day. I'm gonna be here. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for being here.